It was a special day when West Ham beat Bournemouth. Big win for the club. Felt that the mood was really lifting the clouds apart in this season. It just feels like West Ham are actually starting to feel like we're back. We're starting to be the West Ham that we've fallen in love with over the last couple of years, you know. But one big part of it, Riley, in that game, that was kind of it was a wonderful time for the club. Everyone's singing, everyone's shouting. It felt. I mean, I wasn't there. I don't know people that were, and it was Dave and X, of course, were there, and they said it was brilliant. But one thing that was quite noted there was the new chant for Declan Rice. One more year, Declan Rice. He goes all that to 10 years. It's all a bit of a jokey thing and a bit. I mean, it is a bit tongue in cheek. We know that West Ham are just having a bit of love, but there is a bit obviously something more serious to it. West Ham fans are effectively pleading with Rice. Don't leave, you know, can you stay a bit longer? I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't know how much these things play into a player's thinking. I'd like to think it does a little bit, probably not a great deal, but I'm sure. I'd like to think that's given Declan Rice something to think about, that maybe he's having a little bit of a second thought thinking, do I really want to leave this football club at the moment? I don't know. What are your thoughts? Do you think it's going to have that impact on him, something like that?
Well, I think if Harry Kane can stick it out of Tottenham for as long as he's done, then why can't Rice stick it out of West Ham? But I don't know. For me, I feel like he needs to take that next step in his, like, looking at from a player perspective. I feel like he needs to take that next step in his career. But I'm just thinking, where would he actually go? I think he would have to go to a Champions League side. I don't see him going to Chelsea if they've got no European football, because what would be the point in going from West Ham to Chelsea that season when there's no European football, no guarantee of getting football again? You wouldn't want to be in another rebuild, which is essentially what West Ham are sort of in at the moment. And there's no reason why we can't potentially pit Chelsea again next season for that sort of thing. So then you got Man United, who they got Casemiro. I don't think they'll get him. Arsenal, would you go to Arsenal? Maybe, London local, and City. I mean, if they come in for him, then he'd be stupid not to. But there's not that many teams to take that next step with, is my argument. And in a couple of seasons' time, there might be. I mean, I think Real Madrid and Bayern are potentially looking at him as well. But yeah, I think he's just at that age now where he needs to leave for him. But obviously, as a West Ham fan, I'm desperate for him to stay. It's going to be impossible to replace him. It doesn't matter what price tag we're going to put out on him. I have no idea who we're going to replace him with, what the team's going to be looking like, what the club's going to be looking like after that. Dare I say it, this is probably worse than when Pyatt left, and probably worse than when Noble's left as well. This is probably going to be the biggest player to leave our club.
It's a tough one. I mean, it's not going to be pleasant, mate. Declan leaving. I'm still, I've still got that slight candle burning a little bit. I'm in the hope that maybe, at the end of the day, West Ham are holding a lot of cards here. We're in a really strong position where we're actually no need to sell. We could easily say to Rice, you know what? We want you to stay. We're actually not going to accept any offer from you this summer. We appreciate that the value might deplete because of slightly over the course of a year, because you're going to have 1 year left. Do you know what, West Ham? I'd be tempted to do it. I'd be tempted to say to him, look, we'll sell you for 60, 70 million next summer. We'll lose 40 million pounds. You're worth it. We'd rather keep you for another season. But then at the same time, you've got to then think of the player and the mood and what's gone on. I mean, I quite like the fact West Ham fans are expressing this love for Rice, because although I'm sure he's more than aware of it, and he gets told it everywhere he goes when he bumps into a fan that they don't want him to leave, I'm sure of it. But to get it in that kind of volume and noise, I'm sure it did mean a lot to him. One thing that's quite interesting, and I don't know this because, by the way, we're recording this before the podcast goes out with Dave and X, okay, on Patreon. And one thing that was really interesting, I've heard, and I've heard it from a few people now, is that Declan Rice's family were at the game, his brothers and his dad, who also work for him. They work as his representatives, his agents, effectively. And they were all joining in the song and really enjoying it and really enjoying themselves. So they're very much so. There's certainly a lot of love from Declan's family for West Ham. I don't believe that, Declan Rice loves West Ham. There's no denying that at all. It'd just be interesting to see whether this has is given him something to think about. Because at the end of the day, Riley, one thing you could say to Declan, he's not 29, he's not 30, where he's thinking, I've literally got a couple of years 2 or 3 years of football left. Let's be honest, like you've alluded to, like Harry Kane, where he's thinking, if I'm going to win anything, I've got to do this now because I've only got a short period of time left. Declan's got 10 years left of football to play yet at the top level, effectively. He's only just turned 24. I mean, West Ham surely must be able to sit down with him and say, look, we only want you to stay for a couple more years. You've got another 8 years after that, effectively, of still top level football. We'll happily let you go. But we really want to push on for Champions League football. This is where we want to drive as a club, and we need our best players to stay. I mean, if I was West Ham now, and I know I've got the claret and blue tinted glasses on, but this is the time I'd be striking with Rice now, getting his representatives around the table and say, look, I appreciate that you might have an eye elsewhere, an Arsenal move, maybe you're thinking about, or whatever, or Manchester City you're looking at, and that's absolutely fine. But when you see things like we've experienced the last week, where we've competed with Arsenal, we should have beaten them, really. Let's be honest. We've also, we've advanced again in Europe. We're a European semi-final. Things are looking really good. He's next to Lucas Paqueta. It's not like he's surrounded by players that he's beyond, and that he's having to drag these over the line. He's got some very good players around him. I don't know. It's just food for thought, really. But I did like to see it. It's lovely to see the fans that are finally, actually making a bit of a case to him. And I really do hope that, at the very least, that he's given him something to think about, and rather than being so desperate to get out the door. Which I'd like to think that he's not. But I mean, are you? I mean, I'm only going to be quite honest. I mean, we'll talk about this obviously later in the season. But are you of the feeling then that the likelihood of Rice staying is highly unlikely, or do you still think there's a slight chance that he might?
I mean, yeah, there's a chance. I just don't really see from his perspective why necessarily he would buy into this project when he could easily play for any team in this country, and in my opinion, any team in the world. And I think the way that pundits talk about him, the way that other rival fans talk about him, social media companies talk about him, I'd be itching at the bit to go to a top club, become the top performer there, win some medals, and basically shut him up, because he doesn't get as much appreciation as he should playing for West Ham United. And unfortunately, no player ever will, because it's not a top 4 side, it's not a big 6 side. The same case with teams like Brighton and Aston Villa. You're never going to be able to, prove yourself as one of the world's best if you're playing for one of those clubs. And it's a sad thing to admit, but that's just how football works, unfortunately. So if I was Declan Rice, as much as I would probably be happy to stay another year, potentially, I just feel like enough's been said now. He needs to go out and prove himself to the world and show the world what every single West Ham fan has seen for the last, 3 or 4 years. But realistically, as a biased West Ham fan, I'd be very excited for him to stay. And I thought he was going to leave this summer, and he didn't leave. So, there's no reason why he couldn't stay this summer as well.
Absolutely, mate. Let's keep our fingers crossed. We never know what's going to happen here in the end of the season. If Declan Rice lifts the trophy, who knows? It might just spur him on to make him think, you know what, I don't need to hurry just yet. But let's wait and see.